The sun burned mercilessly as Evelyn Carter walked the empty dirt road, her 4 small children trailing behind. Her arms ached from carrying the thin grocery bag, barely enough bread and milk to feed them all. Then she saw her. An elderly woman sitting directly on the ground, clutching an old suitcase like it was the only thing keeping her alive. The woman's clothes were filthy, her eyes hollow and defeated. "Please," the stranger whispered, her voice breaking. "I don't know where else to go." Evelyn's breath caught. She had nothing to give, but walking away felt impossible. That single choice would change everything. Before we dive into Evelyn's story, I have a small favor to ask. If you're moved by this journey of sacrifice and humanity, please subscribe to our channel. We're working toward 1,000 subscribers so we can continue bringing you powerful emotional stories like this one. Your support means everything. Now, let's continue. The decision was made before Evelyn's mind could catch up with her heart. "Come on," she said softly, extending her hand toward the frail woman on the ground. "You can't stay here." Margaret Holloway looked up with eyes that had forgotten what kindness looked like. Her wrinkled hand reached out slowly, trembling as if touching another human being might shatter the fragile moment into dust. Behind Evelyn, the twins Noah and Lucas exchanged confused glances. 4-year-old Amelia tugged on her mother's worn jacket. "Mama, who is she?" "Someone who needs help, sweetheart," Evelyn whispered, her voice tight with emotion she couldn't name. The walk back home felt endless. Margaret moved like someone carrying invisible chains, each step a battle against exhaustion and something deeper, shame perhaps, or the weight of years spent invisible to the world. The old suitcase scraped against the dirt road, leaving a trail behind them like breadcrumbs leading nowhere. Sophie, barely 2 years old, kept turning around in Evelyn's arms to stare at the stranger with wide, curious eyes. The house appeared through the trees, a small weathered structure that had seen better decades. The paint peeled in long strips, exposing grey wood beneath. The porch sagged on one side, and the screen door hung slightly crooked on its hinges. But it was home. It was shelter, and right now it was all Evelyn had to offer. Inside, the air was stale and warm. Evelyn guided Margaret to the worn couch, its fabric faded from years of sun streaming through the curtained windows. The elderly woman sank into it as if her bones had turned to water. "Wait here," Evelyn said, though Margaret looked incapable of moving anywhere. In the tiny kitchen, Evelyn stared at the meager contents of her grocery bag. 1 loaf of bread, 1 gallon of milk, 3 cans of beans she'd saved from last week. Her hands shook as she calculated. 4 children who needed dinner, and now a 5th mouth to feed. The math didn't work. It never worked. But turning someone away wasn't an option her conscience allowed. She made weak tea and placed crackers on a chipped plate. When she returned to the living room, Margaret was crying silently, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks unchecked. "Here," Evelyn said gently, setting the plate on the coffee table. "It's not much, but it's everything," Margaret interrupted, her voice cracking. "You don't understand. I was sitting on that road for 2 days. Cars passed. People looked right through me, like I was already dead." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Noah approached cautiously, his small hand reaching toward the old suitcase. "What's in there?" "Noah, don't—" Evelyn started, but Margaret waved her hand weakly. "It's all right, just old things, memories no one wants anymore." That night, Evelyn lay awake on the thin mattress she shared with Sophie, staring at the ceiling's water stains. In the adjacent room, Margaret slept on the couch, the only spare sleeping space available. The twins shared one small bed, Amelia another. The rent was already 3 weeks overdue. Evelyn's last temp job had ended abruptly when the company downsized without warning. Her savings, what little existed, had evaporated, paying for her husband's funeral expenses a year ago. The grief counselor had said time would heal, but time only seemed to add more weight, more bills, more impossible choices. And now, impossibly, she'd added another person to feed. What was I thinking? The question circled her mind like a vulture. I can barely take care of my own children. What made me think I could help a stranger? But when she closed her eyes, she saw Margaret's face on that empty road, the defeated posture of someone the world had discarded like trash. Evelyn understood that feeling too well. Since her husband James died suddenly of a heart attack at 32, she'd felt the shift. The way old friends stopped calling, the way neighbors' sympathetic looks turned to judgment when she couldn't afford to fix the lawn or repaint the house. The way the world moved on while she drowned in survival mode. She was 29 years old, and some days she felt ancient. Morning came too quickly. Sunlight filtered through thin curtains, illuminating dust particles floating in the air. Evelyn rose quietly, careful not to wake Sophie, and padded into the kitchen. Margaret was already awake, sitting at the small table, hands wrapped around an empty mug as if drawing warmth from memory alone. "I should go," the elderly woman said without looking up. "I'm a burden you don't need." "You're not going anywhere," Evelyn replied, surprised by the firmness in her own voice. She began measuring instant coffee, splitting one packet between 2 cups to make it stretch. "Not until you're stronger. Not until we figure out where you belong." "I don't belong anywhere anymore." The words were spoken so quietly, with such complete resignation, that Evelyn's heart cracked a little wider. She placed the weak coffee in front of Margaret and sat down across from her. "Everyone belongs somewhere. You just haven't found it yet." What Evelyn didn't know, couldn't possibly know in that moment, was that Margaret Holloway wasn't just any abandoned elderly woman. The secrets locked in that battered suitcase would soon tear through their small town like a storm, exposing lies, betrayals, and a truth so shocking it would make headlines across the state. But for now, in the quiet morning light, 2 broken women sat together in silence, sharing weak coffee and the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, neither of them had to face the world alone anymore. Outside, a dark sedan drove slowly past the house, its tinted windows concealing whoever sat inside. It didn't stop, but it would return. What secrets is Margaret hiding in that old suitcase? And who's watching the house? The first week passed in a blur of impossible arithmetic. Evelyn stood in the dim bathroom, gripping the edge of the cracked porcelain sink, calculating meals like a mathematician solving for survival. 5 people, $3.47, left until Friday's potential temp shift at the packaging warehouse. Maybe. Her reflection stared back, dark circles carved deep beneath bloodshot eyes, hair pulled into a messy knot, lips pressed into a thin line of determination that was really just exhaustion wearing a brave face. Outside, Margaret sat on the porch steps, shoulders hunched forward, watching the twins chase each other around the overgrown yard. The elderly woman had barely spoken since arriving, moving through the house like a ghost afraid to leave fingerprints on a world that had already erased her. But the children saw her differently. Noah brought her dandelions pulled from the lawn, their stems bent and broken. Lucas showed her rocks he'd collected, each one special for reasons only a 5-year-old could understand. Amelia sang off-key songs while dancing circles around Margaret's feet, desperate for approval. And Sophie, tiny, fearless Sophie, had claimed Margaret as her own personal guardian. The toddler refused to nap unless the elderly woman sat nearby, her small hand gripping Margaret's wrinkled fingers like a lifeline connecting 2 sinking ships. Evelyn watched through the window, her chest tight with emotion she couldn't afford to examine too closely. She'd expected Margaret to be temporary, a brief act of kindness before someone came looking. But nobody came. No frantic family searching, no concerned friends checking hospitals. It was as if Margaret Holloway had vanished from the world, and the world hadn't noticed. The town, however, noticed everything. Biz. Henderson from next door appeared at the fence on Tuesday morning, her sharp eyes taking inventory. "I see you've taken in a guest," she said, the word dripping with judgment thick as honey. "Just helping someone who needed it," Evelyn replied, keeping her voice neutral. Mrs. Henderson's mouth puckered. "Charity's admirable, dear, but you can barely feed your own. People are talking. They're saying you're being reckless, irresponsible even." The words struck like physical blows, but Evelyn kept her expression blank. People can say whatever they want. That evening she found a note slipped under her door. "Some of us work hard for what we have. We don't appreciate strangers bringing problems into our neighborhood. No signature. Cowards never signed their cruelty." Evelyn crumpled the paper and threw it away, but the words burrowed under her skin, festering like infection. By Thursday, the pantry shelves were nearly bare. Evelyn made watery soup with half a potato, 1 carrot and a bouillon cube dissolved in hope. The children ate without complaint. They'd learned not to ask for seconds. Margaret ate slowly, mechanically, her eyes distant. When Evelyn cleared the bowls, the elderly woman whispered, "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry for being a burden." "You're not." "I am. I see it in your face. The worry, the calculations. I know what hunger looks like, child. I wore it myself once." Margaret's voice cracked. "You should turn me out, before I drag you down further." Sophie toddled over and climbed into Margaret's lap without permission, burying her face in the old woman's shoulder. Margaret's arms wrapped around the child instinctively, protectively, and tears slipped down her weathered cheeks. In that moment, Evelyn understood something fundamental. Margaret wasn't just being sheltered here. She was healing. And somehow, impossibly, so were they. That night, unable to sleep, Evelyn heard sounds from the living room, soft crying, muffled and broken. She crept to the doorway and peered inside. Margaret sat on the couch, the old suitcase open beside her, its contents spread across the cushions. Papers, photographs, documents with official seals. In the dim lamplight, the elderly woman clutched a picture frame, her whole body shaking with silent sobs. Evelyn caught a glimpse of the photograph. A much younger Margaret standing beside a tall building, dressed in an elegant suit, looking powerful and confident. Nothing like the broken woman on that dusty road. Before Evelyn could retreat, Margaret sensed her presence. Their eyes met across the darkened room. "Who are you?" Evelyn whispered. "Really?" Margaret's hands trembled as she carefully returned items to the suitcase, her movements quick and panicked, like someone hiding evidence of a crime. Someone who made mistakes, someone who trusted the wrong people. "Margaret, please." The elderly woman's voice turned desperate. "Don't ask me questions I can't answer yet. Just give me a little more time. I promise I'll tell you everything, but not now, not when they might still be looking." They. The word hung in the air like a threat. "Who's looking for you?" Evelyn stepped forward, heart hammering. "Are you in danger? Are my children in danger?" "No, God, no. It's not like that." Margaret's eyes were wild, frightened. "It's complicated. It's about money and family and things that happened before you were born, but I swear on everything holy, I would never put your babies at risk. Never." The two women stared at each other across the small room, separated by secrets and desperation. Finally, Evelyn nodded slowly. "Okay. But Margaret, if something's wrong, if someone's after you, I need to know. I have 4 children depending on me. I can't protect them from threats I can't see." "I understand. Soon. I'll explain soon." Margaret closed the suitcase with shaking hands, the latches clicking shut like a vault, sealing away truth. "You're a good woman, Evelyn Carter. Better than you know. Better than I deserve." Evelyn returned to bed, but sleep wouldn't come. Her mind spun with questions, fears, and a growing certainty that Margaret Holloway's past was far more complex than a simple case of family abandonment. In the morning, she found Margaret asleep on the couch, the suitcase tucked protectively beneath the coffee table, one hand draped over its edge even in sleep, guarding secrets that refused to stay buried. And when Evelyn checked the mailbox, she found something that made her blood run cold. An official-looking letter with no return address, containing a single typed line. "We know she's with you." Who's searching for Margaret, and what do they want? The truth is closer than Evelyn realizes, and far more dangerous. The letter burned in Evelyn's pocket like a live coal all through Friday morning. "We know she's with you." 4 words. No signature. No explanation. Just a cold certainty that someone somewhere was watching, waiting. The paper felt thin and cheap, but the threat behind it was solid as iron. Evelyn kept glancing at the windows, expecting to see figures in the shadows, eyes tracking their every move. The paranoia crawled under her skin, making her jump at ordinary sounds. A car door slamming down the street, footsteps on the sidewalk, the mail carrier's truck rattling past. She hadn't shown Margaret the letter. Not yet. The elderly woman was already fragile, balanced on the edge of something Evelyn couldn't quite name. One wrong word might shatter her completely. Instead, Evelyn tucked it deep in her dresser drawer, beneath worn socks and faded photographs of James, her husband's smile frozen in time, back when the world made sense. Margaret spent the morning in unusual silence, sitting by the window with Sophie curled in her lap, both of them watching clouds drift across the grey Oregon sky. The old woman's fingers absently stroked the child's fine hair, her expression distant and haunted. "Penny for your thoughts," Evelyn said softly, settling into the chair across from them. Margaret blinked, returning from wherever her mind had wandered. "I was thinking about my daughter. She would have been about your age now." The words came out flat, drained of emotion. "I haven't seen her in 7 years." 7 years. Why? Because she chose them over me. Margaret's jaw tightened. My son-in-law convinced her I was unstable, senile, a danger to myself. He wanted control of... She stopped abruptly, catching herself. It doesn't matter now. What's done is done. But it did matter. Evelyn could see it in the way Margaret's hands trembled, in the hollow ache behind her eyes. Whatever had happened, whatever had driven this woman to that empty roadside, it had left scars that went deeper than skin. Before we continue, I want to pause and ask for your help. If this story is touching your heart, if Evelyn's struggle and Margaret's mystery are keeping you hooked, please take a moment to subscribe. We're so close to reaching 1,000 subscribers, and your support allows us to keep bringing these powerful stories to life. Click that subscribe button. It means more than you know. Now let's see what happens next. The afternoon brought unexpected visitors. 2 women appeared at the door, volunteers from Grace Community Church, carrying a casserole dish covered in aluminum foil. The taller one, mid-40s with perfectly styled blonde hair, introduced herself as Patricia Mercer. "We heard you've been going through a difficult time," Patricia said, her smile bright but hollow. "The church believes in supporting those in need." Evelyn accepted the dish warily, sensing something beneath the charitable gesture. "That's very kind, thank you." Patricia's eyes drifted past Evelyn, scanning the interior of the house. "We also heard you've taken in a house guest, an elderly woman." There it was, the real reason for the visit. "A friend who needed help," Evelyn replied carefully. Of course, of course. Compassion is admirable." Patricia's smile never wavered, but her eyes were cold, calculating. "Though I'm sure you understand, as a single mother, you need to be careful about who you bring around your children. Background checks exist for a reason." The implication hung in the air like poison gas. Evelyn's grip tightened on the casserole dish. "Margaret is not a threat to my children." "I'm sure you believe that. But dear, you don't really know this woman, do you? Where she came from, what she might be running from." Patricia leaned in conspiratorially. "Between you and me, some folks in town are concerned, very concerned. Then they can mind their own business." The words came out sharper than intended, but Evelyn didn't apologize. She was exhausted from defending herself, tired of justifying basic human decency to people who saw compassion as weakness. Patricia's expression hardened. "We're only trying to help. It would be unfortunate if someone felt the need to contact child services. Make sure you're providing an adequate environment for your little ones." The threat was unmistakable. After they left, Evelyn stood in the kitchen, shaking with rage and fear. The casserole sat on the counter, suddenly looking less like kindness and more like a Trojan horse, a way to get inside, to see the conditions, to gather evidence. Margaret appeared in the doorway, her face ashen. "You heard. Every word. I'm bringing trouble to your door. You should nothing." Evelyn's voice was steel. "These people don't care about my children. They care about control, about punishing anyone who doesn't fit their perfect little suburban fantasy." But that night, lying awake again, Evelyn's resolve wavered. What if they did call child services? What if her poverty, combined with housing a stranger, gave them grounds to investigate? She'd heard horror stories, kids taken from loving homes over unpaid bills, over houses that weren't perfect, over mothers who were trying their best but falling short of impossible standards. The fear was a living thing coiling around her chest, squeezing tighter with every breath. At 2 a.m. she heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps on gravel. Someone was outside. Evelyn moved silently to the window, peering through the gap in the curtains. A figure stood at the edge of the property, barely visible in the darkness, watching the house. Tall, broad-shouldered, utterly still. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She reached for her phone, finger hovering over 911, but hesitated. What would she report? Someone standing on a public street? The figure remained for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Then, slowly, deliberately, they turned and walked away, melting into the shadows. When Evelyn returned to her bedroom, she found Margaret standing there, clutching the old suitcase to her chest. "They found me," the elderly woman whispered, her eyes wide with terror. "After all this time, they finally found me." "Who? Who found you?" Margaret's hands shook violently. "The people who destroyed my life, the ones who took everything. And now," her voice cracked, "now I've led them straight to you." Margaret's past has caught up with her, and Evelyn's family stands in the crossfire. What really happened to Margaret Holloway, and how far will her enemies go? Morning light filtered through the kitchen window, but it brought no comfort. Evelyn sat at the table, her hands wrapped around a mug of coffee gone cold hours ago. Margaret hadn't slept. Dark purple bruises of exhaustion shadowed her eyes, making her look a decade older than she had just days before. The suitcase rested between them like evidence at a crime scene. "Tell me everything," Evelyn said quietly. "No more secrets. If we're in danger, I need to know why." Margaret's fingers traced the worn leather of the suitcase, her breath shallow and uneven. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. "My name is Margaret Eleanor Holloway. 30 years ago, I founded the Holloway Foundation for Children's Education, one of the largest charitable organizations in the state." Evelyn blinked, the words not quite registering. "You... what?" "I built it from nothing. My husband left me a modest inheritance when he died, and I used every cent to create something meaningful. Schools, scholarships, programs for underprivileged kids." Margaret's eyes grew distant, seeing a past that felt like another lifetime. "For 20 years it was my purpose, my legacy. What happened? My daughter Victoria married a man named Richard Ashford. Charming, ambitious, ruthless." The words dripped with venom. "He convinced Victoria that I was losing my mind, that I was making poor financial decisions, that I needed to step down before I destroyed everything I'd built." Evelyn leaned forward, her pulse quickening. "Were you making poor decisions?" "No." Margaret's voice turned hard as stone. "I was blocking his attempts to redirect foundation funds. He wanted to funnel money through shell companies, pay inflated consulting fees to his friends, turn a charity into a personal bank account. When I refused, he started a campaign to discredit me." The elderly woman's hands trembled as she opened the suitcase, revealing stacks of documents, bank statements, board meeting minutes, emails printed on yellowing paper. "He had doctors declare me incompetent, paid for psychiatric evaluations that painted me as delusional. My own daughter testified against me in court, tears streaming down her face, saying she feared for my safety. Oh my God. The judge ruled in their favor. I was removed from the foundation's board. Richard was appointed as interim director." Margaret's voice cracked. "I tried to fight it, hired lawyers, gathered evidence, but Richard has connections, politicians, judges, media executives. Every door I knocked on closed in my face." Evelyn's mind raced, pieces clicking into place. "The person watching the house last night? They work for him?" "Richard has investigators, people who ensure problems disappear quietly." Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "I've been hiding for 8 months, moving from town to town, staying in shelters when I could, sleeping rough when I couldn't. I thought I'd finally lost them. Thought I could just fade away. But they found you. They always do." The weight of it settled over the room like fog. Evelyn thought of the anonymous letter, the church women's thinly veiled threats, the figure in the darkness. This wasn't just small-town gossip or nosy neighbors. This was organized, deliberate, dangerous. "We need to go to the police," Evelyn said, already standing. "Show them these documents, explain what happened." Margaret laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "And tell them what? That a wealthy, respected philanthropist is actually corrupt? That his investigators are harassing me? Evelyn, honey, Richard donated $500,000 to the police department's community outreach program last year. He's photographed shaking hands with the mayor, the governor. Who do you think they'll believe?" The truth of it hit like a punch to the gut. Money didn't just talk, it wrote the rules, bought the referees, and decided who got to play. Evelyn sank back into her chair, feeling the walls close in. She was a broke widow with 4 kids and an eviction notice probably coming any day now. What power did she have against someone like Richard Ashford? The twins burst through the front door, their faces flushed from playing outside, dirt smudged across their cheeks. "Mama! Mama! There's a fancy car outside!" Evelyn's blood turned to ice. She moved to the window, heart hammering, and looked out. A sleek black sedan sat parked across the street, not the same one from yesterday, but equally menacing. The windows were tinted dark, impossible to see inside, but she felt eyes on her. Watching, waiting. "Stay away from the windows," she told the children, her voice steady despite the terror clawing at her throat. "Go to your room and play quietly." "But Mama." "Now, Noah." The seriousness in her tone sent all 4 children scurrying to their room. Evelyn pulled the curtains closed, her hands shaking. Margaret had gone pale as death. "He's sending a message, letting me know he can reach me anywhere, that there's nowhere safe. Then we make this place safe." Evelyn's jaw set with determination she didn't feel. "We document everything, we keep records. If anything happens, he'll make sure you're the one who looks unstable." Margaret's eyes were hollow. "That's his specialty. He destroys people's credibility first, so when they cry for help no one believes them." They sat in tense silence, listening to the children's muffled voices from the bedroom, the ordinary sounds of play against the extraordinary weight of danger pressing down on them. Hours passed. The car remained. When Evelyn finally worked up the courage to check again at dusk, it was gone. But something had been left behind. A business card tucked into the screen door, plain white with embossed black lettering. Richard Ashford. Executive Director, Holloway Foundation. On the back, handwritten in neat script, "We should talk about your house guest. I'm willing to be generous." Evelyn crumpled the card in her fist, rage burning through fear. This man, this monster, thought he could buy her silence. Thought she'd hand over a terrified elderly woman for what? A few $100? 1,000? She thought of Margaret on that empty road, abandoned and alone. Thought of her own children, who'd learned to stretch love across empty dinner plates because love was all they had in abundance. "He's offering money," Evelyn said, walking back inside. Margaret nodded, unsurprised. "He always starts with money. What did you tell him?" "I didn't tell him anything, because I'm not talking to him." Evelyn's voice was steel wrapped in fire. "Whatever he wants, whatever he's offering, the answer is no." For the first time since arriving, Margaret smiled. Small, fragile, but genuine. "You're either very brave or very foolish." "Maybe both." Evelyn managed a weak smile in return. "But I've been poor my whole life, Margaret. I know what matters and what doesn't. And selling out someone who needs help? That's not poverty. That's something much worse." Outside, darkness fell over Maplewood, like a curtain dropping on the first act. The real confrontation was coming, and neither woman was ready for how dirty Richard Ashford was willing to play. Richard Ashford has made his move, offering money to make Margaret disappear. But when Evelyn refuses to be bought, what will he do next? The stakes are rising, and the danger is closing in. The knock came at 9 a.m. on Monday morning, sharp, official, unmistakable. Evelyn's stomach dropped before she even reached the door. Through the frosted glass, she could make out 2 figures, their postures rigid with authority. She glanced back at Margaret, who had frozen mid-step, her face draining of color. "Mrs. Carter," a woman's voice professionally polite. I'm Sandra Reeves from Oregon Child Protective Services. This is Officer Daniels. We'd like to speak with you about your living situation. The words punched the air from Evelyn's lungs. This was it. Richard Ashford hadn't bought her, so now he'd destroy her. She opened the door with trembling hands, forcing her expression into something resembling calm. Sandra Reeves was mid-40s, wearing a navy blazer and carrying a leather portfolio that screamed government efficiency. Officer Daniels stood behind her, hand resting casually near his belt, his eyes already scanning the interior of the house with practiced judgment. "May we come in?" It wasn't really a question. Evelyn stepped aside, her heart thundering so loud she was certain they could hear it. The children emerged from their bedroom, sensing tension the way animals sense storms. Sophie clutched Margaret's leg, her thumb in her mouth. The twins stood close together, their usual energy dimmed by fear they couldn't name. "I see you have 4 children," Sandra said, making notes on a tablet. "And an additional adult in the home?" "This is Margaret. She's a friend who needed temporary shelter." Evelyn's voice came out steadier than she felt. "I see." Sandra's pen moved across her tablet with quick, efficient strokes. "And how long has Margaret been residing here?" "About 2 weeks." "Have you conducted a background check on this individual before allowing her to live with your minor children?" The question was a trap, elegant and inescapable. "No, but are you aware of her full legal name, her history, any criminal record?" "She's not a criminal." Evelyn's hands clenched into fists. "She's an elderly woman who was abandoned. I helped her. Since when is compassion a crime?" Sandra's expression remained neutral, professionally blank. "No one is suggesting compassion is a crime, Mrs. Carter. However, we have a responsibility to ensure children are safe. We received an anonymous report expressing concerns about the welfare of your children." Anonymous. Of course it was. Officer Daniels moved through the house, his eyes cataloguing everything. The worn furniture, the sparse pantry visible through the kitchen doorway, the water stains on the ceiling. Evelyn watched him documenting poverty like it was evidence of abuse. "Your children appear healthy," Sandra continued, her tone softening slightly. "But I'm concerned about the financial strain of supporting an additional person. Can you provide documentation showing adequate income to feed and shelter 5 people? Evelyn's throat tightened. She had no documentation. She had $3 in her wallet and prayers that Friday's temp shift would actually materialize. "We're managing," she said quietly. "Mrs. Carter, I want to help you, I really do." Sandra's voice took on a practiced sympathy that felt more dangerous than hostility. "But I need you to be honest with me. Are you struggling to provide basic necessities for your children?" "Yes, God, yes, every single day." But saying it out loud meant admitting failure, meant giving them ammunition to take her babies away. "We're fine," Evelyn whispered, hating the lie, hating herself for having to tell it. Margaret stepped forward suddenly, her voice stronger than Evelyn had heard in days. "This woman has been surviving impossible circumstances with grace and dignity. She works multiple jobs, stretches every dollar until it screams, and her children are fed, clothed, and loved. If you're looking for neglect, you won't find it here." Sandra's eyes shifted to Margaret, studying her with new interest. "And you are?" "Someone who recognizes genuine goodness when she sees it." The social worker's expression flickered, something uncertain passing across her professional mask. "I'll need to see the children's sleeping arrangements, verify they have adequate space." The inspection felt endless. Sandra checked beds, opened closet doors, ran her finger along surfaces checking for dust, while Evelyn stood by, humiliated and helpless. This was what poverty looked like through the lens of judgment. Every worn carpet, every chipped plate, every makeshift solution became evidence of inadequacy. Finally, mercifully, Sandra closed her tablet. "I'm not removing the children today. However, I am opening a case file. I'll need to conduct follow-up visits to ensure conditions improve." She handed Evelyn a business card. "I'm also requiring that Margaret undergo a full background check within 72 hours. If she refuses, or if anything concerning appears, we'll need to revisit this situation." After they left, Evelyn collapsed onto the couch, her whole body shaking. Margaret sat beside her, equally shaken. He's backing me into a corner, Margaret said, her voice hollow. If I submit to a background check, Richard will know exactly where I am. He'll have legal grounds to have me committed again. But if I don't, you'll lose your children. The impossible choice hung between them like a blade. That evening, as Evelyn tucked the children into bed, Noah whispered, "Mama, are they going to take us away?" The question shattered something inside her. "Never, baby, I promise." But promises meant nothing against power, against money, against men like Richard Ashford, who played chess with human lives. She returned to the living room to find Margaret on her phone, an old flip phone pulled from the depths of her suitcase. The elderly woman's hands shook as she dialed. "What are you doing?" "Something I should have done months ago." Margaret's jaw set with grim determination. "I'm calling the one person who might still believe me. My former attorney, Jonathan Pierce. He's retired now, but he helped me build the foundation from the ground up. If anyone can help us fight Richard, it's him." The call connected. Margaret's voice trembled as she spoke. "Jonathan, it's Margaret Holloway. Yes, I'm alive. I need your help. I need you to help me prove I was never incompetent and expose Richard Ashford for the thief he really is." When she hung up, her eyes were blazing with something Evelyn hadn't seen before. Hope mixed with holy rage. "He's coming tomorrow. He's bringing documents Richard thought were destroyed. Evidence of the embezzlement, the falsified psychiatric reports, everything." Margaret's voice grew stronger. "It's time to stop running. Time to fight back." Evelyn's heart raced with equal parts terror and exhilaration. They were about to go to war against someone with unlimited resources and no conscience. But they had something Richard Ashford had forgotten existed: the truth. And sometimes, against all odds, the truth was enough. Margaret is ready to fight, and a powerful ally has emerged from the shadows. But will Jonathan Pierce's evidence be enough to take down Richard Ashford? The final battle is about to begin. Jonathan Pierce arrived at dawn, carrying a weathered briefcase that looked older than Evelyn herself. He was in his 70s, tall and lean with silver hair and eyes that missed nothing. The moment he saw Margaret, his expression crumpled. "My God, Margaret, what has he done to you?" They embraced like soldiers reunited after a brutal war, and Evelyn felt the weight of their shared history, decades of trust, of battles fought together, of a friendship that had survived even when everything else burned. Jonathan spread documents across the kitchen table, his gnarled fingers moving with practiced precision. "I've been collecting evidence for 2 years, waiting for the moment you'd be ready to fight back. Financial records showing Richard funneling foundation money through fake consulting firms. Emails proving he bribed the psychiatrists who evaluated you. Testimony from board members he threatened into silence." Margaret's hands trembled as she picked up each document, tears streaming down her weathered face. "This is everything. This is proof." "It's more than proof. It's a weapon." Jonathan's voice hardened. "But using it means going public, means facing Richard in court, enduring media scrutiny, reliving every humiliation." "I'm ready." Margaret's voice didn't waver. "I've been hiding long enough." Evelyn listened to them strategize, her mind racing. This was real. They were actually going to challenge Richard Ashford, expose his corruption, reclaim Margaret's legacy. But a nagging fear gnawed at her gut. Men like Richard didn't lose quietly. The answer came faster than any of them expected. At noon, 3 vehicles pulled up outside. The black sedan Evelyn recognized, a news van with a satellite dish, and a luxury SUV that screamed wealth and power. From the SUV emerged a man in an immaculate charcoal suit, his salt and pepper hair styled perfectly, his smile practiced and predatory. Richard Ashford had come in person. "He's here," Margaret breathed, her face going pale. "Let him come," Jonathan said grimly. "We're ready." But Richard didn't come to the door. Instead, the news crew set up cameras on the sidewalk while Richard stood in the center, microphone in hand, looking every inch the concerned philanthropist. "What is he doing?" Evelyn whispered, peering through the curtains. They found out seconds later when a reporter's voice carried through the thin walls. "Mr. Ashford, You've called this press conference to address concerns about Margaret Holloway. Richard's voice was smooth, sympathetic, perfectly calibrated for public consumption. Margaret Holloway founded our organization 3 decades ago, and we honor her legacy every day. However, as her family and medical team have documented, she's been suffering from severe cognitive decline. For the past 8 months, she's been missing, and we've been desperately searching. Margaret made a choking sound. Richard continued, his expression pained. We recently learned she's been taken in by a local family. Well-meaning people, I'm sure, but unequipped to handle someone with her medical needs. I'm here today to bring Margaret home, to ensure she receives proper care in a qualified facility. The lies were elegant, devastating, wrapped in concern so authentic that even Evelyn almost believed them. He's going to have me committed again, Margaret whispered, her voice breaking. Right here, right now, in front of cameras. Who's going to argue? A poor widow and an old lawyer against a man the media loves. Before we reach the climax of this story, I want to ask one final favor. If Evelyn and Margaret's journey has moved you, if their fight against injustice has resonated in your heart, please subscribe to our channel. Hit that subscribe button and help us reach 1,000 subscribers so we can continue bringing you stories that matter. Stories about real courage, real sacrifice, real humanity. Your support changes everything. Now let's see how this battle ends. Evelyn's hands clenched into fists. Something hot and fierce ignited in her chest. Not courage exactly, but something raw. Rage at injustice. Fury at watching the powerful crush the vulnerable, while cameras recorded it as charity. She walked to the door before anyone could stop her. Evelyn, don't... Jonathan started, but she was already outside, stepping into the harsh sunlight, marching straight toward Richard Ashford and his perfectly orchestrated show. Mrs. Carter, Richard said smoothly, turning his practiced smile on her. I understand you've been caring for Margaret. That's very compassionate of you. Now we'd like to take over her care professionally. You mean lock her away again so she can't expose you? The words cut through his polished performance like a knife through silk. Richard's smile tightened fractionally. I don't think you understand the situation. I understand perfectly. You stole from a charity. You had your own mother-in-law declared insane so you could control her money. And now you're here with cameras because you think public pressure will force her into silence. Richard's mask slipped, cold fury flashing in his eyes. You have no idea what you're talking about. You're a broke widow living in squalor. What could you possibly know about complex financial... I know what matters. Evelyn's voice rang out clear and strong. I know that woman in my house has more integrity in one finger than you have in your entire body. I know she was abandoned on a road to die, and I know you're the reason why. The cameras swung toward Evelyn, sensing a better story than the one Richard had scripted. Behind her, the screen door opened. Margaret emerged, flanked by Jonathan, who carried his briefcase like a weapon. The elderly woman looked fragile but unbroken, her spine straight, her eyes blazing. Hello, Richard, Margaret said, her voice steady. Surprised to see me standing? Richard's composure cracked further. Margaret, please, you're not well. Let me help you. The way you helped yourself to $3 million in foundation funds. Jonathan's voice was sharp as broken glass. He opened his briefcase, pulling out documents. These are financial records spanning 5 years, shell companies, fraudulent invoices, money laundering disguised as consulting fees, and here, he held up another stack, are emails between you and Dr. Hammond discussing how much you'd pay him to diagnose Margaret with dementia she never had. The reporter's eyes widened, cameras zoomed in on the documents. Richard's face flushed dark red. This is slander. I'll sue you. With what money? The money you embezzled? Margaret's voice was steel now, all trembling gone. I'm filing criminal charges, Richard, for fraud, for elder abuse, for conspiracy. And I'm reclaiming my position at the foundation I built with my bare hands and my dead husband's faith. For a long moment, Richard Ashford, powerful, connected, untouchable Richard Ashford, stood frozen, his carefully constructed world collapsing around him on live television. Then he turned and walked back to his SUV without another word, the cameras capturing every second of his retreat. The story exploded across Oregon within hours. By evening, news outlets were calling it the biggest charity scandal in state history. Richard Ashford was arrested at his home that night, charged with multiple counts of fraud and elder abuse. The Foundation's board unanimously voted to reinstate Margaret as Director Emeritus, pending a full investigation. Victoria, Margaret's daughter, appeared at Evelyn's door 2 days later, tears streaming down her face, begging her mother's forgiveness. The reconciliation was painful, halting, but genuine. Some wounds healed slowly, but they could heal. 3 months later, Margaret stood in the law offices of Pierce and Associates, signing papers that made Evelyn Carter her legal representative and co-trustee of a newly established fund, the James Carter Memorial Scholarship, named for Evelyn's late husband, dedicated to supporting single parents pursuing education. "I can't accept this," Evelyn whispered, staring at the bank statement showing an initial endowment that would ensure her children never went hungry again. "You already did," Margaret replied, her eyes bright. "The moment you stopped on that road, the moment you chose kindness over convenience, you saved my life, Evelyn Carter. Now let me give you back yours." That evening, in their small house, which would soon be replaced by something more secure, more stable, Evelyn tucked her 4 children into bed. Sophie clutched Margaret's hand, refusing to let go until the elderly woman promised to be there in the morning. "Always," Margaret whispered. "I'm not going anywhere." Later, standing on the porch watching stars emerge in the darkening sky, Margaret turned to Evelyn. "Do you know what I learned, sitting on that road waiting to die?" "What?" "That the richest person isn't the one with the most money. It's the one with the most humanity." Margaret's voice was soft but certain. "You had nothing, Evelyn, and you gave everything. That's true wealth." Evelyn thought about the journey, the fear, the hunger, the impossible choices. She thought about how close they'd come to losing everything. But mostly, she thought about what they'd gained, family, in the truest sense of the word. "We did it together," she said simply. And in that moment, as night settled over Maplewood like a gentle blanket, 2 women who had once been strangers stood side by side, survivors, sisters, proof that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is refuse to walk away from someone else's pain. Because whoever opens their heart to shelter one soul might just discover they've saved 2. Thank you for experiencing Evelyn and Margaret's journey. Their story reminds us that true richness isn't measured in bank accounts. It's measured in the courage to care when no one's watching, to fight when the odds are impossible, and to believe that one person's compassion can change everything. If this story touched you, please share it, and remember, the world needs more people willing to stop on empty roads.